All right, another VBA macro. This VBA macro suggestion comes from one of our LinkedIn connections. Audi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. What we have here is a request for a macro that can traverse a folder that contains old SOLIDWORKS files. Right, open them and then do Control+7 for proper view and zooming. So I think here is referring to the isometric view here. And then save the file and then close the file and then move on to the next item in that iteration. And this will keep the folder with the latest SOLIDWORKS version format and update all the thumbnails as well. Yay, I love thumbnails. I have opened the VBA editor here. If you don't know how to do that, you can go to Tools, New, Macro, and then New. And then once you do that, it will prompt you to save your macro to a location on your computer. You do that, and then you'll get this visual basic for applications editor with a bunch of code that you could just delete. I don't care about that code. We're going to write this thing from scratch. However, if you want the macro and you don't care about this video and you don't care about actual VBA, you just want to use that stuff to get your work done and go home, then there'll be a link in the description of this video that will take you to our GitHub, and it will have the complete source code of this macro written and tested so that you could use that stuff and get all of your work done. But if you're interested in watching this video, then yeah, stick along. We're gonna write this thing. Shouldn't take very long. We'll make sure that we can run through it smoothly, and I'll take some time to explain a few gotchas with this VBA macro. All right, let's get things started. As always, this is the highest level object of the API, the SOLIDWORKS. Always, you have to define your SW app. I mean, you can call it anything you want. It doesn't have to be called SW app, but you have to define a variable of type SOLIDWORKS that's going to point to the SOLIDWORKS application that's in the background right now. Okay? So dim_sw app as SOLIDWORKS.SOLIDWORKS, and then we'll just define a second variable here. We'll just call it SW model, just because we're going to be working with models, right? As model doc2. Right, and then we'll just, oops, I was gonna type in main, sub main, so that's what I'm gonna do now, sub main, so our main subroutine, and this is where we're gonna inject our code. So we'll start with this setting the SW app. Everybody knows that it's set SW app equal to application.SOLIDWORKS, right? We get the gist. And now let's just define dim folder location, which is a variable that's going to hold the folder location where our files exist, right? So let's see here. I've got some notes on my other screen, and in my notes I do have the location of the folder. So let me set that. So set folder location equal to user desktop. It's on my DXF assembly. Oh, that's actually comes from my DXF video. So I'll put a link to that video in the description or the post that I'm gonna be doing on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. So this will be the folder location that we are going to traverse, and we need some logic that's gonna do the traversal of the folder. So we're gonna use a VBA library called scripting.filesystemObject. That could be the subject of another video. I'm just gonna run through this pretty quickly, and it's like 4 lines of code, so we shouldn't really dwell so much on this because this falls a little bit outside the scope of what SOLIDWORKS API programming is about. So let's just define a variable called FileSystemObject as an object. Keep it mysterious. And then we'll just define another variable called folder as an object as well. Another mysterious object, and then we'll just set the file system object, why not, to be equal to create object, which is a VBA function that's going to call this library scripting.filesystem system object, and we'll create an instance of this class. And then using the file system object, I'm going to be able to set the folder object. So file system object dot get folder, and in it I'm going to supply it with the folder location variable that we just defined a second ago. Now, with this, let me take my video blur out there. With this, we're going to be able to do a for each loop. So for each file in folder, right, dot files, and then we'll do next file. We're going to be able to traverse the content of our folder. Now, the content of the folder can be anything. You could have SOLIDWORKS parts, you could have SOLIDWORKS assemblies, but you could have a bunch of other files that we do not want to touch. So we have to filter out files that are parts and assemblies from the other stuff. So we'll have to do an if statement logic here that's going to make sure that we only perform our logic on parts and assemblies. So how do we do that? Well, we could do that with the name of the file and inspect the extension, right? And in order to do that, I'm going to copy paste this function called endWith that's going to evaluate if the ending string that we supplied to it actually exists at the end of the first string. So just a really simple VBA function. I didn't want to write this as part of this video because again, it just goes out of the scope. VBA is notorious for not having the awesome class library methods that .NET has, so we really don't want to dwell on this either. Just a function. Pause the video if you want to pause it, and then write the function so that we can, jump into the next item in our agenda here, or line of code. All right, so we'll do an if statement. So if ends with file.name SLDPRT, right? Then do stuff. We'll get to that do stuff in a minute here. And then else if ends with file name ends with SLDISM, right? So if it's an assembly, then do some stuff. And if, right. Maybe we can do some indentation here. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Indentation? Yeah. All right. Ends with process part. And then I need to process assembly. Okay. So let's set that SW model to be equal to SW app, and we are going to use a method called opened up for the first time that's going to expect us to supply it with the file name and then the type. So we'll use the SW const SW documents types with an S dot SW docs part. Yes. And then we'll do the same thing here. SW part of assembly. Oops, right, there you go. Now, if we have, let's say that the first iteration had a part, and then the second iteration had a Word document or a PDF. So the second iteration is not going to, it's going to jump these. Because the file does not have that proper extension, I think we need to make sure that we set the SW model equals nothing here, right? Because we need that. And then when we make sure that our model is nothing, we clear it up for our next opening. However, if the first file is an assembly, it's going to open the assembly, right? But if it opens the assembly, it's also going to open the references of the assembly, which might be files that are going to be processed next, invisibly. So it's going to only show you the assembly window, right? So just to be careful here, this is very tricky because it actually opens up in memory more than the file itself. It's going to open up the assemblies that it can. So we'll just have to go into the SW model at this level and make sure that it's visible. If this part happens to be already open in SOLIDWORKS, we'll just make it visible. We'll do the same thing because, you know, it goes, the same is true for assembly. So SW model is visible. And then once we're done with that, what we can do here is that we can create a method, isometric, I guess. What should we call this? Refresh to isometric, and you guys can probably see that I'm looking left here to my notes. Oops. We'll call it refresh to isometric, and it's going to take in that SW model, right? And we'll define this here in a second. So we'll copy this up here and paste it down here as well. And then let's just go down to this level and define not there, sub refresh to isometric. And then do a byref SW model as model.to. And this method is going to set show the isometric view. So for that, we're going to use a method called show named view2, and then the name of the isometric view that starts with a star sign, so isometric or star character, isometric. And since we have provided the show named view method with the name of the view, we can just specify the view ID to be -1. And then, you know what, for sake of completeness, we'll do a view zoom to fit to. All right, that's good. So let's go back to our finicky logic here. So we're making sure that we open in the document, setting it to visible, and then calling this method to refresh the view, or to set it to isometric. And then all we have to do is do SW model dot save, and we can actually SW model dot save and SW app dot quit doc. Yeah, that should do it. Right. I mean, there's so many ways that this macro can break. If you open things in read only, or if you already have things that are open in read only, so this will probably not work, or will prompt you to do a save as. There's so many other situations where opening the open doc would trigger SOLIDWORKS to show some sort of warning, and that warning comes in the form of a dialog box, and that could stop the execution because that dialog box would require user interaction. So you could be in the middle of your iteration at, you know, item number 15 or 16 or whatever, and then it just stops. And the way to work around that is to launch SOLIDWORKS in batch mode. That could fix it. Again, it for the most part it will work. But there are use cases where things might not necessarily work because the code does not account for every single use case. I can even extend that to the zoom to fit. One thing about the view zoom to fit is that you actually do have to have the window maximized for a proper zoom to fit. So it will fit within the visible area. So if you have almost like a small window of SOLIDWORKS, then it will only try to make it fit to that. And so you'll end up with a very small thumbnail. So you don't want that. You don't want to have that. Sorry, just want to make sure that your SOLIDWORKS is actually maximized. So let's run this thing. All right. And got a few mistakes here that I need to correct. Yes, and that strings cannot be set. And SW app, oh, we forgot to do this, get title. All right. And let's just copy paste this from here to here, right? All right. Man, it looks like it's doing stuff. Yep. Looks like it's done. All of my DXF assembly files have been completed or have been resaved as the latest version of SOLIDWORKS. This is part of the DXF video. I'm going to put a link to that video in the description as well. But anywho, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next VBA macro.